Hey everyone, it's been a while. I'm Z, and this is a last minute league starter for Path of Exile Scourge League 3.16. Today I want to talk about the build that I'm going to be starting the league with, which is a Baron Zombies and Skeletons Necromancer. The key item for this build is the Baron, and historically it's been as low as 1 Chaos on day 1 of the league. So it should be very accessible unless somehow a bunch of other people are playing this. Um, the notable feature of this build is that it is strength stacking on a witch, which is kind of out there if you just sort of think about it from like a general what you would expect perspective. But here we get a lot of benefits. Strength implicitly gives life and melee physical damage, and half of our strength with the Baron is given to all of our minions, not just our zombies. We also get an additional zombie for every 500 strength we have, and we're going to aim for 1,000 strength. So that's going to be plus 2 zombies, which is a lot of damage. And then with 1,000 strength is where this build really gets going in terms of defenses, because our zombies will leech life to us, and that's going to be an enormous amount of sustain in basically any content we would want to be. The zombies and skeletons are going to be on the same 6 link, which is kind of not generally what you see a lot, but it works out really well for this build, because rather than a 6th link on just the zombies or the skeletons, we have an entire extra set of minions that are being supported with the other links. We end up with 11 of each of them between our passive tree and our items and gem levels. And we end up with just around 3 million damage. And this is a pretty conservative estimate. We're going to be running skeleton zombies, 11 of each. Impale, multi-strike, minion damage are the definitely run these ones. And then as the last link, both Predator and Brutality are good. I'm going with Brutality personally because Predator does rely on you having the enemy marked with signal prey, which is not going to be something that's very common during mapping. Um, and something, and Brutality is just always up. So Brutality, you could swap multi-strike out while clearing for melee splash to increase your clear speed by quite a bit, and that's generally what I'm going to be doing. The build will eventually get to a point, though, where you don't need melee splash, because your zombie's AoE skill, the slam that they do, is going to deal enough damage to just kill basically anything in play. In the Baron helmet itself, it gives plus 2 to minion gems, so we're going to be using Spectres and an Animate Guardian just to give them that extra survivability that leveling up the gem gives. For Spectres, we're going to be using Carnage Chieftains, which are big ape guys that give everything frenzy charges that are their allies. And we use Life Tap to make it so that their mana doesn't prohibit them from casting that spell as often as they can. Our Animate Guardian is not currently set up in this PoB because it's really flexible in terms of what you can use. The go-to for me is generally having something cheap like a Belly of the Beast, Victario's Flight, and a couple of other just general support items on him for both defenses and offenses. We're linking them both to Meat Shield just so that they take less damage and sort of stick around closer to us and don't go anywhere dangerous. In terms of auras, we are going to be running Dread Banner and Pride on one link. Um, Generosity does not support Pride, but it does support Dread Banner. Generosity is going to make it so that Dread Banner's effect is stronger on our minions. We don't need that effect on us. and Pride just makes the enemies take more physical damage, which is globally good. We are also going to be running Purity of Elements and Vitality. Purity of Elements is getting its mana cost increased to 50% mana reserved, which is pretty big, but at the beginning of the league, I think it's worth it. You can definitely spec out of it later, and I probably will. But at the beginning of the league, getting so many elemental resistances and elemental ailment immunity is going to be very nice. And you see that this says 34%. That's because I've currently got it set to level 30. That is because in Scourge Leauge, this is getting buffed so that 34% is the level 20 amount. And it will also be granting immunity to elemental ailments to us and our minions. Vitality gives us some extra life regen to both us and our minions, which is nice. Precision and Clarity are both level 1, and they exist solely for this 2% damage increase that you see here on each of them. And this is because we are using the Commander of Darkness node of Necromancer. This is similar to Purity of Elements in that we're running it for a boost to our early game elemental resistances. Between Purity of Elements and Commander of Darkness, you should have about 20 elemental resistances base with no resistances on gear. We're also going to be running Flesh Offering and Poacher's Mark for increased damage. Flesh Offering can be used whenever, and Poacher's Mark you will probably only ever need to cast in single target fights. Convocation is both a positioning tool for our minions to keep them out of danger and a recovery tool to get their life back up, because it does grant them a strong regeneration. Currently, I have planned to use Chaos Golem to give us a little bit more tank, but if you want more damage, you could definitely swap this for a Carrion Golem. This guy is currently linked to Feeding Frenzy and Maim, so that he will give our whole crew the Feeding Frenzy buff, and he will also maim enemies, causing them to take more physical damage, which is very useful. And then we've just got Flame Dash for movement, and Bone Armor is a skill granted to us by Bone Barrier on the Necromancer tree. And this is similar to Steel Skin, except that it applies that damage barrier to both us and our minions. And I personally am just going to put this on left click so that it's easy and has good uptime. But if you are playing in hardcore, you might want to put this elsewhere so that you do not have it down when you need it to be up and you have finer control over it. But for a softcore player, just having it on left click should be good enough. In terms of the rest of our items, other than the Baron itself, the only unique that I would also say is like a must-have is Alberon's Warpath, because this gives us an additional skeleton, and it gives us increased strength, and like quite a bit of it. This will really help us hit that 20 or the 1000 cap that we are trying to hit for the Baron to gain that skeleton or the zombie leech. Other than that, here we have an Astramentus, just in case you need just a ton of flat attributes to try and cap on Baron. If you already are getting plenty of strength from other sources, you could definitely use a rare here. For weapons, I am currently planning on using a Femur of the Saints early on. This could easily be replaced by Convoking Wands that have good minion rolls and have +2 level of all minion and spell gems on them. And the endgame ideal is wielding 2 +2 Convoking Wands. But for quite a bit of the early game, I'm probably going to be leaning on Femur of the Saints for both its damage and its recovery, because it does give us life regenerated per zombie and chance to block per skeleton. Another good option early is Queen's Decree and Queen's Escape, because those just give us extra zombies and skeletons. It's just generally got a bunch of nice to have minion stats. Personally, I would prefer Femur of the Saints because it's more defensive, but Queen's Escape is pretty good as well. It all depends on what's going to be a cheaper 6 link at the very early stages of the league. All the rest of my gear here just has life and strength on it. Not even a whole lot of either of them, really. Just like sort of something that I think is achievable within the first few days of the league. Jewel slots are interesting because we have a few options. I would say there's 3 main options for each of our jewel slots. We can either use just a jewel with life and strength on it, because those are the 2 stats we really care about on a normal jewel. Or right here in particular, you can put an efficient training, and putting it in that slot that is right here gets us about 100 extra strength. And I would recommend that if you are currently struggling to cap out on strength for the Baron. And the third option would be a Ghastly Eye Jewel that has chance to taunt on it for minions, along with life and maybe even flat physical damage for minions. That's probably a better bet than this jewel, but it will definitely be a lot harder to come by early on. As far as the tree goes, we've got some really interesting stuff going on with the masteries. Up here, the first mastery that I want to talk about is life. And this is just a flat 50 life, which is just a really good bonus, and it's 1 point, and I think it's worth it. Down here, similarly, for life masteries, we have Vitality has increased mana reservation efficiency, which cuts Vitality's mana reservation in half, effectively, meaning that it's much easier for us to reserve on a limited mana pool. If you have quite a bit of mana from your gear and you don't need this, you could swap this out for something else, or just take the point and put it elsewhere. In terms of minion related masteries, here by Enduring Bond, we're taking minion attacks overwhelm 20% of physical damage reduction. And my understanding of this is that this is going to effectively be a 20% more multiplier on our damage. But PoB does not currently have that implemented. Over here, next to Redemption, we are going to be taking minions have a chance to gain Unholy Might for 4 seconds on kill. For just 1 point, this is quite a bit of nice bonus to our clear speed. It'll definitely help our minions really just delete those pesky rares and blue packs and stuff like that. Down here, next to Grave Pact, which we're just taking for some more damage, we've got increased effective offerings, because we are using Flesh Offering here, which gives us a ton of attack and movement speed for the minions. And just increasing the amount of effectiveness that has is something that is very good to scale. The only 2 other masteries that I currently plan on taking are down here at Utmost Might, which is giving us a ton of strength, this small cluster here, and really helps us fill out for the Baron. We are taking the attribute mastery that gives percent increased attributes, just so that we can get as much strength as possible. And then up here, we are taking Corrupted Blood Cannot Be Inflicted on You, which is going to be very, very good until we can be maybe a week or so into the league and get cheap Corrupted Blood jewels with the stats that we are wanting. And Anointed Flesh gives +1 to all elemental resistances. The rest of the cluster isn't that great for us right now, while we're still using Purity of Elements, but it becomes much more valuable as we get later and start to phase out Purity of Elements for resistances on gear, and we try to make room for different auras such as Blood and Sand. As far as the rest of the tree goes, we are also taking the Reservation Mastery here to just give us more room for our auras. And we're kind of straining right now because Purity of Elements reserves so much mana. So taking this whole cluster is very good, as well as giving us quite a bit of damage due to Pride being a very strong source of increased damage taken for the enemy. For configuration, just to show that these aren't some crazy inflated numbers, we are facing Cirrus, and due to our Chaos Golem, the enemy is maimed and we have Feeding Frenzy. Pride only takes a couple of seconds to hit maximum effect, so I think it's pretty fair that we enable that. We've got a bunch of minions summoned, and we are summoning our zombies or our skeletons, sorry, pretty frequently. So we have used a minion skill recently, basically at all times, because we also need to consider that both Flesh Offering and Convocation are minion skills. I have not enabled Frenzy Charges, even though in most fights they will be enabled. This really shoots up our damage. But it's been a while since I've used Carnage Chieftains, and I'm not 100% sure on their uptime. So I just, to be safe, want to have that disabled. And we're still sitting at a pretty comfortable 3 million damage without it on a very shoestring budget here. And that is basically the build. So to get here, I have a couple of leveling pieces put together. Here we have an early axe tree where we are probably going to start off at the very beginning going for Enduring Bond and getting this so that our minions last longer, because we're going to probably just be using skeletons and SRS at the very beginning, because our zombies are going to be quite squishy until we get some more nodes going for them. After that, we are going to probably go up to Lord of the Dead and then into this life cluster, at which point we'll be taking the life mastery for 50 life. Afterwards, I would quickly take quick recovery and the vitality reservation so that we can get vitality online as soon as possible to keep our minions up. Then up into Death Attunement to get us an additional Spectre, Zombie, and Skeleton pretty early, which will be very nice. And then down here into Reservation Efficiency, because around this time is when you'll probably be having plenty of auras that are fighting for space on your reservation. And so I would pick this up pretty much around that point. And then going down here into Redemption and grabbing Unholy Might so that our minions have some better clear. And then a little bit later on into the axe, your next step is probably just to grab Brave Pact, all of this life here, and then Devotion for just some more life. And then once you have a Baron and are in like early maps, that's when I would start to fill out the rest of this tree. I would probably not go down into this Utmost Might. I probably wouldn't go past this area at all until you have the Baron. I would focus more on life. But once you do have the Baron, getting down to Utmost Might very quickly is going to be important. Because at 500, you start to really benefit from the Baron, but at 1,000 is when your Zombie Leauge comes online and you become very, very tanky from it. I'm not too sure about the value of the Scion Life Wheel over here. I'm just sort of taking it because more life is always good. I'm not sure if I'm going to swap that out for something else at some point. As far as the Ascendancy goes, the first Ascendancy node I'm going to take is Commander of Darkness, simply because that gives us a lot of elemental resistance, meaning we need to focus less on micromanaging items in town and more time leveling through the axe. Afterwards, I am going to be gunning it for Unnatural Strength, because this is one of the single strongest nodes in the game for a minion build. Because this both gives us more levels for damage on our gems, as well as giving us more total minions from the gems being higher level. And then lastly, Bone Barrier gets us a nice defensive layer, and that will be very valuable. So overall, that is basically the build. If you have any questions about it, feel free to leave a comment below. If you have any suggestions, I'm more than willing to take them. I'm always looking to improve these builds. I will probably post an update maybe a week into the league on how the build is going, how far I've gotten, what the build has done so far, any changes I've made, stuff like that. So if you are interested in seeing something like that, please subscribe to the channel and you'll see that in your feed sometime soon. And that's about it. I thank you for watching this video, and this is Z, and I'm hoping to see you all in Scourge Leauge.